let's start working on our player scene. So if we come over to here, we've looked at our file system. That's where we manage our files. We're going to come up here to our scene section. And here is where we construct our scenes. Godot is a node-based game engine. We connect nodes together to make scenes. We connect our scenes together to make bigger scenes. And we connect our bigger scenes together to make our game. It's almost too easy. Let's start creating our player scene. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here where it says create root node, and I'm going to click 2D scene. And it's created it with the most basic node you can get, which is a node 2D. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to press Control click, and I'm going to go down to change type. And I'm going to change it to a character body 2D. That's what we need to create a character. Double click. And if I go over here, the inspector is where we make changes to our nodes, where we finesse them, where we customize them for our own needs. So you can see here it's changed my root node to a character body 2D. And look at all these attributes that our node has. So each different node has different attributes. It can do different things, okay? And our job is to pick the right node for the right job. Look over here though, it's still called a node 2D. It's still called a node 2D. So I'm going to double click and I'm going to call it player. There's a bunch of stuff I need to add to my player scene. And we got a hint for that here. Node configuration warning. It has no shape, so it can't collide or interact with other objects. So let's add another node. So I've got my player node clicked, selected, and I click on the plus here. And this brings up the menu. If I just delete that, you can see what a vast choice of nodes we have. What do I need? I need a collision shape. Collision shape 2D, that's what we want. And I'm going to double click that. So we've got our collision shape 2D. I'm going to click back on player because I need to add another node. So I click on player, make sure that's selected, and I click plus. And I want a sprite. Our sprite is the graphical image of our player. Notice that both times I did that, I had player clicked, okay? Very important to get your parent-child relationships right. If you build a scene and it goes a bit weird and you get weird behavior when you start playing your game, check your parent-child relationships. What I mean by that is you can see both of these nodes here are directly connected to the parent node, which is the player here. Okay, that one and that one. If I just click and drag that one to there, you can see now the sprite is what we call a child of the collision shape. Okay, and we don't want that. The collision shape is a child of the player and the sprite is a child of the collision shape. We don't want that. So always check you have the right node selected when you add another node in order to get your parent-child relationships correct. To fix that problem, I'm just going to move it back up into the player, and now collision shape's a child of the player, sprite 2D is a child of the player. All right, now I have my sprite, I need to add a texture. The texture is the art that makes the picture of the character on the screen, okay? So what I need to do, I need to add a texture. I go over to Assets, and I expand by clicking on the little arrow. And I go into Art, and I expand that, and I want my sprite sheet. Go down to Robot Miner, and all I do is click and drag over into Texture. And I get my entire sprite sheet displayed on the screen, okay? You notice it's added it off center, so this represents our screen, this line, what we'll see when we play the game, the viewport. And it adds everything, what we call 0, 0, so that is the top left-hand corner. So most of that sprite is off the screen. Doesn't matter, because obviously we can't use a sprite like that. It's we can't have all of those robots going around the screen at once. So we've got a bit of extra work to do, and for that we need the animation tab here. So I just click on the arrow again to open the animation tab. And we have these two attributes, H frames and V frames. We simply need to tell Godot how many horizontal frames we've got, how many vertical frames we've got. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames in the horizontal plane. So change that to 5. And how many have we got in the vertical plane? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So change that to 5 again. And we're back to one picture of our robot. All right, that's great. So now we've got our robot. I'm going to make the screen a bit bigger. And I'm going to bring my robot into the middle. Now I'm going to work on this collision shape. So I click on collision shape, and we've already had that warning. A shape must be provided for the collision shape 2D to function. Please create a shape resource for it. So over here, handily, collision shape 2D, and we have our shape resource. We've got to choose a shape, and I'm going to have a capsule shape. I can't see my capsule shape because my sprite 2D is further down the scene tree than the collision shape 2D, okay? So it draws everything in order. First it draws the collision shape, then it draws the sprite on top of it. Just simply going to click and drag. Got to be careful. I don't want to make the collision shape a child of the sprite. I want to keep it as a child of the player. So have I done that right? Yes, I have. Look, it's still a child of the player. And now I've got this little green thing here. And that's our collision shape. So I think I'm going to click on the sprite, move the sprite a little bit to there. So the collision shape's in the middle. Then I can click on these little dots here and get the height and the width correct. And that looks good. I just want it to cover most of our player. And that looks okay. So, capsule shape. So I've got a radius of 21 pixels and a height of 62 pixels. I might change the height to 64 to make it match the sprite. There we go. Radius of 21 looks good. And all I did to get that menu was click on where it says capsule shape. Just to get rid of it, I just click capsule shape again, click on it to get the menu, click on it to get rid of it. And that's great. All right. Now we need to think about getting our player to move. Okay. For that, we need to go back to the parent node, which is player. And we need to click this little icon here. Attach a new or existing script to the selected node. So to move our player, we need a script. So I'm going to click that. Brings me up a menu. This is where it's going to save it. I haven't saved the player yet, but it looks like it's going to save the script with the player. In fact, I'm going to cancel that. Let's save our player somewhere different. So I'm going to go Command S to save. Might be Control S if you've got a Mac. I'm going to save it in characters. Shall I make a new folder? I think I will. I'm going to click Create Folder, and I'm going to call the folder Player. Click OK. So it saves it as Player Scene, and I'm going to click Save. And it saved it. All right, cool. And now it's called it Player up here, look. Let's click the Add Script icon again. And it's saving it in the same place as the player. Some people like to have a separate folder for all the scripts, but I like to save them with the scene that they relate to. That's just my habit. Look at where it says template. Godot has a built-in script to handle character movement. Look at this, character body 2D basic movement. That is fantastic. So we already have a script to handle our character movement. So let's just click Create. And we have our script here, okay? There are some changes we need to make. Remember when we created our actions in our chores section, look at the actions here, UI accept, UI left, UI right. They are user interface sort of inputs. So they're sort of more to do with looking at a menu within your game, okay? Not really to do with controlling your character. Let's put our own actions in. So I'm going to double click, try and get my cursor over there. And I'm going to delete UI accept. And if you'll remember, we called our jump action jump. And look, it already knows what we're trying to do, so I just press enter and I get jump. Same thing here, UI left, UI right. Select it, it'll say left. Great. Select it. I'm just double clicking and it's selecting it for me. Delete. And just put right. And that should enable us to move our player. Let's see if it works. In order to test our scene, we go up to this little clapperboard icon here, okay? Look what it says, run current scene. If we click that, that runs our whole game, right? And that's what we use for testing our game, but it won't work at the moment. Look, if I click that, it says we haven't defined a main scene, okay? And we haven't done that yet. So I'm just going to cancel it. But we want to just test the scene that we played. So we click on this icon here. And our player drops straight from the top of the scene to the bottom. That must mean that gravity is working, so that's good. But let's see if we can test it a little bit better. So I'm going to go back into my player scene here. And you know, it's up here when we created the script, it went to our script view. So if I change it back to 2D, like that, I'm going to shrink it a bit so that we can see our whole screen. And what I want to do is first move my player a little bit more onto the screen so we can see it. When I move my player, I need to click first that, and then I want to click this, okay, this little icon up here, group selected nodes, and the shortcut is Command G. This sticks all the nodes together so I can move them all at once. If you haven't got that clicked, there's a danger you could click on this and try and move it and only move one, perhaps only move one of the children away from where it's supposed to be, and that will make your game play very weirdly, okay? So when we want to move a scene in its entirety, we click this. I normally leave that clicked as a default, but bear in mind, if you do want to move the sprite or the collision shape within the scene, you need to unclick it, okay, like we did earlier. But I want to move it all at once, so I've got it clicked, and I just click and drag. And my player's over there on the screen now. If we test our scene, our player drops from the top to the bottom, which must mean gravity's working. Let's see if we can move our player. So I'm going to go back into script. What I'm going to do here just briefly is I'm going to set gravity to 0. So I've got my cursor at the beginning of line 8 for me, where it defines the gravity variable. VAR gravity equals project settings.get setting, and then it gets the gravity out of the project settings. So we've been in project settings before. That's where we can change our gravity. Just going to put a little hash sign or pound sign at the beginning of that line, because that is what makes Godot ignore what we've written. So if I put my little pound sign in, that line goes grey. Now I get a warning because I'm using the variable gravity here, but I haven't defined it. So I just go VAR gravity. I'm just set it to 0. And that should hopefully go away. Now, when I go into my scene, if I click on 2D there, and I press the icon to run it, gravity has gone away, but look, I can move my player. So I'm using my arrow keys because we set them up, remember? And I can also use A and D. My player moves. Success. Okay. Go back into my script. Delete the line I just wrote. Delete the little pound sign there. go back to where we were before, and we have a game where, when we play it, our player just falls through the screen, but we can move our player. So that is progress, but it's a bit of a rubbish game. So next time, let's set about making a world in which our player can move. I will see you in the next section.